CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy. After 2 years and more than 80 episodes of our Conversations on African Philanthropy, we are introducing a series of conversations that are theme-specific, program-focused, and at times recorded at the request of those at the coalface of implementation in order to document and tell their experiences and stories. In the first of such series, we focus on the ZimAlliance initiative, whose grants, convenings, capacity building, and technical support have fostered a vibrant civil society, where partners were empowered to design innovative and coordinated responses that amplify the voices of those marginalized, influence the capacity of citizens to mobilize around national critical issues, engage with policymakers, and built regional and international solidarity in pursuit of a better Zimbabwe. Formed in 2010 to strengthen the role of civil society in influencing Zimbabwe's transition to democracy, the alliance has evolved over several phases to what it is today. An initiative of several partners, ZimAlliance is a story of resilience, innovation, dedication, and passion expressed somewhat beautifully in some of the least expected places and ways.
Welcome to a special episode with me, Moyo. Today we are focusing on one of the initiatives that was established by a set of donors more than 13 years ago. And this is the ZimAlliance, an intervention that came out of an idea that was born mainly because of two individuals with their comrades who initially were concerned about the issues in Zimbabwe, and they went on a hunger strike for a number of days. As a result of that, a couple of donors decided that they were going to intervene in the country by supporting civil society organizations from a variety of backgrounds, supporting those that were sophisticated enough working on policy issues, supporting community organization, supporting artists, and as well as supporting activists, among them some of the women groups. I'm happy to be joined by Sithabile Dewa. Sithabile, welcome to the conversations.
Thank you, Prof. Becky.
I think I will be doing injustice if I tried to read your introduction. Instead, I would want you to tell us a bit about yourself, as well as the organization that you established.
I'm Sitabile Dewa. I'm the founder and executive director for the Women's Academy for Leadership and Political Excellence, WALPE, which is a women's rights feminist organization that works on empowering women, young girls, young women, and women with disabilities to take up leadership positions at both local and national level in Zimbabwe.
And when was the institution established, and why did you establish it?
The organization was founded in 2018 after the 2018 elections, where the number of women who made it into parliament and council were very low, less than 14% of both local government and parliament. That's when we thought that there is need to be intentional and deliberate about going into communities, identifying young women who want to run for public office, providing them with tailor-made capacity enhancement programs around transformative feminist leadership. How do you boost their confidence, the knowledge that they have to translate into local leaders and national leaders? So that's when I approached TrustAfrica with the idea that we wanted to establish the first tailor-made leadership school for women in politics in Zimbabwe. And we got assistance from TrustAfrica, and we managed to set up the institution. Then it was quite very small, and we trained a number of women in the first years, but the organization has really grown to date. We have managed to train 16,700 women across all the 10 provinces in Zimbabwe. Those women, some of them are already in leadership positions, some of them are councillors, MPs, some are in cabinet, some are occupying the lower level leaderships, the school development committees, village, ward development committees, and also other social platforms where women's leadership is also key, like burial societies and all other social groups.
So before we get to maybe much of the work that you are doing, especially the successes, I mean 16,700 women in less than 5 years. That's a lot of work and something to be commended. But I wanted to go back to a conversation that I was just listening in, and you were talking to Cynthia and Julia about the challenges or maybe the perceptions and some of the barriers that women face when it comes to political participation.
Yes.
Especially looking at the patriarchal nature of the system, but also, Cynthia was talking about ageism. Maybe we can go back there and talk a bit about some of that and how it has manifested itself, and how it probably also influenced you to actually establish this academy.
Okay. The reasons why women don't run for public office are diverse and quite complex. Not only a Zimbabwe problem, but a regional, continental, or even a global problem. But the major stumbling block is the animal called patriarchy, and it's all facets, issues of gender-based violence, which also translates into political violence when it comes to women who want to contest for political positions. There is the issue of unpaid care and domestic work, where women are expected to do almost everything. Women, young girls at home, take care of the sick, tend for children, fend for the family. In countries like Zimbabwe, where water, electricity is a challenge, they have to make sure that they look for fuelwood, they look for water, clean the house, clean the family, take care of everyone, but at the same time, still expected to show up and run for public office. But we all have 24 hours per day. So at the end of the day, you then see women lagging behind in terms of effectively participating in leadership positions. There is participation where you just show up, but are we being represented as women? Are we having voice to air our grievances? We have particular challenges that we face as women. So I feel that women should be able to be at the table and be able to proffer solutions to the challenges that they face, not just in Africa, but also across. And the issue of political violence that I was talking about, it's also breeding online violence. With the coming in of technology, it has been a good thing, especially during the COVID era and beyond, where the whole world was then forced to engage and interact on social media, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, but the environment has been so toxic and intolerant to women, where you see women being attacked. Look at all the top women leaders there and raise the issues of revenge pornography, body shaming, which at the end of the day, other women, especially from the private sector or the conservative, they end up saying, no, let me just leave and not run for public office. So how do we create safe spaces for women to also utilize the internet? There are efforts that are being made by governments putting in place cyber laws, but they are not really explicit and clear to deal with issues of sexual harassment that affect women in leadership. Then the other challenge that women face, especially contesting for electoral positions, is the issue of vote buying. With the levels of poverty in Africa, Zimbabwe included, the political environment has been monetized. If you don't have the resources, if you don't have the money, you'll not be able to make it. Men sell cars, they sell stands, houses just to be in parliament. But as women, what are we supposed to sell? Poverty in Africa, where is the face of a woman? We have nothing. So what can we do? So we also introduced the Social Entrepreneurship Initiative, where we train women in social entrepreneurship, business management, value packaging, and also give them small income generating projects in a revolving fund manner, so that they'll be able to cater for small little things. We don't have the resources to buy votes, but just some little logistics during elections, where you'll be able to move from point A to point B, be able to buy airtime or even refreshments for your campaign team. We don't want women to be sexually abused by men for them to just get little funds for campaigning.
So then we get to the time when you are setting up the academy, and you mentioned some support from TrustAfrica. In my introduction, I spoke about the Zimbabwe Alliance initiative, which is operated within TrustAfrica. And the idea there, like I said, was a couple of donors coming together to assist civil society formations in Zimbabwe, starting from around 2011, thereabout, mainly to strengthen their participation in various areas of the country, whether it's political participation, economic empowerment, supporting the arts, supporting women's movements, among others. And so that process has continued till today. And so the grants that you received from them are conceptualized within that framework. And so maybe let's talk a bit about this. I mean, I know you started telling us about the training and all of that, but if somebody is listening and watching, what would be your key program areas that you focus on as an academy?
Okay, the flagship program for WALPE is Transformative Feminist Leadership, the trainings. It's just capacity enhancement. That's like the initial flagship program of the institution. But we then realized that challenges that affect women are holistic, they're complex. You train a woman, she's ready for leadership. But if society is not ready, if the structural inequalities, issues of policy is lacking, is not supporting the woman, you then create a woman who exists in a vacuum. But you then need to go out there, make sure that you advocate and lobby for an environment that is conducive for women to participate. That's the reason why we end up partnering with the Ministry of Women's Affairs, the Parliament of Zimbabwe, especially the Women's Caucus, the Zimbabwe Gender Commission, and other commissions, especially the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, to collectively working towards creating a conducive environment for women to rise and occupy leadership position. A woman can show up for leadership, but if there are no laws to protect her from political violence, from vote buying, from just being recalled, party politics, how do you then continue to enhance women's participation when there's a regression and reversal of gains? So we then have to branch into other initiatives that then assist the work that we do, including engaging men in their comfort, safe spaces in order to change harmful social norms, the negative perceptions of women as less of human beings and incapable of leading. How do we raise men of quality who are able to defend and understand that it is also women's rights, it is also a human right for women to rise up and occupy leadership positions. There's a lot of work that has been done by those who have walked the journey before us, especially during the constitutional making process, where they managed to push for very progressive sections within the Constitution's provisions under Section 1756 and 80. It clearly speaks about the need for gender equality in all leadership positions. So how do we then ride on that to make sure that we make the leadership understand the agency and the importance of making sure that we achieve gender balance in Zimbabwe?
So the first grant that you got from TrustAfrica, I mean, essentially it was to help you set up. So what came out of that, other than the actual institution, what came out of that?
Okay, it's very difficult to get an organization that believes in an idea in a world where there are a lot of competing issues and competing ideas. So the first thing that I can mention, just the ability for them to listen through the ZimAlliance project, to see life, to see prospects in the initiative. So just the ability to create space for you to present your idea, something that I really appreciate. And for me, that's like the starting point, to say just the ability to be available, to listen, to upstarts. Most upstarts, they end as ideas because you wouldn't have managed to find organizations or individuals who would want to invest in them. The second was the ability to get resources to launch a project of that magnitude. I remember in 2018 when we got the funding, we did our launch with aspiring women leaders from Mazoe. Then we did mapping exercises across the country. Who is doing what? How can we add value so that there's no replication of duties and responsibilities? We're able also to do the first round of trainings post 2018, and some of the women actually contested in the by-elections that took place between 2018 and 2023 and won. So it went beyond just getting the seed funding to launch the campaign, but to actually see it to fruition by assisting us to do the first trainings that really got women into leadership positions. And that has actually then multiplied to what we are seeing here, where we have more than 16,000 women trained and 30,000 members. And it has also grown into another initiative where we set up the first women-led community-based organization network called WICOBS under WALPE, where we are now expanding our work, not only focusing on Zimbabwe, but also the continent, where we are implementing the Pan-African Women Political Leaders Movement, engaging women from different regions within Africa so that we collectively come together and expand the work that we've been doing in Zimbabwe of identifying, grooming, coaching, and mentoring women for leadership.
Yeah, and then you said you also had the second grant or rather support, but I suppose it's now encapsulated into what you've just said, now having to assist you with these other new initiatives. Anything to add there?
We have also been assisted by TrustAfrica to do learning visits beyond the Zimbabwean borders. There are countries that are doing well in terms of promoting women's political participation, like Rwanda, even Kenya, and here South Africa. So I'm glad that they created an environment where we're able to identify prospective women who want to run for public office. Some of them were appointed first female mayoresses in Zimbabwe, something that was never done, where you get young women being elected. But they came to South Africa to learn about the South African context, the South African politics. They traveled to Rwanda, they traveled to Malawi, they traveled to Kenya with the support of TrustAfrica. We're also able to expand our work to continental and international platforms like this UN Women CSW platform that is held in New York. The first attendance of WALPE was facilitated by TrustAfrica through the ZimAlliance project. So just the assistance to be able to present your work, not at a national or continental level, but it's an international platform where you then take whatever that is coming out of the international platform to take it back home. It has really worked in terms of boosting the confidence of women and also making government officials understand, because some of these learning leadership visits, we went with government officials, with parliamentary representatives, with even cabinet ministers, who then went and saw what other countries were doing in Rwanda in terms of promoting women political participation. But for me, issues of gender equality are low-hanging fruits. You might not be doing well as a country. You might be having issues. But look at Rwanda. It's now at the global platform, limelight, because of just being able to allow women to take up key and influential leadership positions.
You spoke earlier about your collaborations with different government or state institutions like your Electoral Commission, Gender Commission, and others. What has been your experience so far in terms of that attempt to work with them? Has it been hugely successful, or there are still barriers working with government and state institutions?
The state institutions, when it comes to issues of gender equality, they're quite receptive. We have done a lot of great initiatives, great partnerships, great campaigns, all in the niche of trying to push for gender equity in Zimbabwe. I've seen them coming, supporting our initiatives, even when they're having their own initiatives, even when there's a problem, they've been coming to support. I remember in I think it's 2022 or 2021, when there was the Constitutional Amendment #1, we all came together as the women's movement and said no to the extension of the women's parliamentary proportional representation quota system, because we don't want piecemeal leadership positions. We want 50-50 as stipulated in the Constitution. And we had the Zimbabwe Gender Commission supporting us on that 50-50 campaign. We had the Parliamentary Women's Caucus supporting us on that 50-50. We had the President of the Senate supporting us on that 50-50. We also had the Minister of Women's Affairs then supporting us on that initiative. So it has been really good working with government, independent commissions in light of the push for gender equality. But the problem has been political will, especially from the key apex leaders, because as long as those who make the law don't understand the importance of making sure that they abide by the constitutional provisions, they align the electoral provisions with the Electoral Act, then we have a challenge. I'll still go back to Rwanda. The reason why Rwanda is doing well in terms of achieving gender balance in key leadership position is because the president himself is at the forefront of making sure that women take up leadership positions. So our plea then goes back to the president of Zimbabwe, president of opposition political parties or other political parties in Zimbabwe. They need to understand the agency of making sure that women occupy leadership positions.
So, I mean, as I'm listening to you speak, I'm cognizant of the fact that this has been a 5 or so years intervention, and with more support going forward, it is obvious that there could be more successes and even greater impact. So if you were to think of how donors engage in this space, what would be some of the things that you would say to donors, having learned in the last 5 years how you've been working with TrustAfrica? How would you want other donors to be engaged?
Prescriptive programming does not work. I've noticed that with TrustAfrica, they have a different model of grant making or of assisting organizations where you go with your ideas and they fund those initiatives. I've seen a lot of donors where they want you to fit your programming within their own own strategy or their, I don't know how to express it, but how they would want the project to come out. But I like the approach of TrustAfrica, where they allow you to dream, to fulfill your ambition, your idea, and they fund exactly what you want to implement. So for me, I hope other donors will have that flexibility. We are working in very complex environments, very complex, fluid situations where things can just change dramatically. They should have that flexibility to understand that maybe sometimes instead of training 50 women, we need to abort the trainings, maybe do solidarity, assistance with the women whose rights would have violated. You go to communities, you train women, get into leadership, you motivate them, you create platforms for them to speak. But when their human rights are being violated, you then go back to your cocoon, they want assistance. Then other organizations will be like, no, we don't do that. We don't want to get into politics. But everything about women political participation is political. So just that flexibility and the ability to allow you to work within your own parameters, objectives, and mission is something that I would really encourage other donors to.
So are there any limitations to the way in which your institution is working, and also the way in which grants have been, or the support has been given to you? I mean, I hear the success and the approach that TrustAfrica is taking, but when you think back 5 years down the line, are there any areas where you would think, you know, for us to even reach greater impact, maybe these are the improvements that should happen?
I think the major challenge currently facing most civil society organizations in Zimbabwe, maybe generally all over, is the issue of lack of institutional funding, where 90% of your projects are project-based. So who's supposed to implement when maybe salaries for the director is 150, contribution, finance manager is 120.
So project-based funding.
Exactly. So where do you get a qualified person who will be earning that literally, and most of
and
this
where will they
project,
be implementing from actually? Because if it's project-based, it assumes that people already have paid up infrastructure, paid up lights.
exactly.
So you're
So you get
implementing it from a tree.
There's no rent, there's
Yeah.
no internet, you can't even buy laptops. How are we supposed to implement? And some of these initiatives are quite short, maybe 3 months, 6 months. How do we then see through the results? So those are some of the challenges that we have been facing.
I mean, back to the successes. I mean, am I hearing you saying in the last 5 years, you can clearly identify a number of women who have gone through your training, and as a result of that, well, let me say training, capacity building broadly, and as a result of that, they are now placed in key, maybe let's say political and public service positions. So that's one. And two, that there's been some kind of broadening of understanding and appreciation of the need to open up the space for women's participation. But thirdly, that there have been lessons from elsewhere, which you think are going a long way to changing maybe even mindsets around some of the people, especially the key political position holders in the country. Is that a fair summary of what I'm hearing without putting the numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think we are doing well. I think we have done well, and it's so humbling that in less than 6 years, WALPE is actually one of the top women's organizations in Zimbabwe when it comes to issues of women political participation. And if it wasn't for the support from institutions like ZimAlliance and also the women who showed up for leadership, it's one thing to get assistance financially, then you fail to get the constituency. So really, it has been an interesting 5 years.
So no, thank you so much for that, because I think you know people do so much and amazing work. I've met you in several spaces now. And now it makes sense because,
you believe, why is she in all this?
Because now you've explained all those trips are learning trips. And they are made in a way that you actually get to the UN. And while you're at the UN, you also meet others who are doing probably similar work. You are in Rwanda, you are in this. The idea is really to take as many women also as possible to those spaces, because at times it takes exposure in order to change mindsets and behaviors. So I'm really looking forward maybe to having another conversation maybe after 3 or so years to see the extent to which you will continue with this journey, and hopefully you will also get more support, not just from TrustAfrica but also from other like-minded donors. So thank you so much, Sister.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you. We will see you next time.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to the CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.